My name is Bob Buffone. I'm CTO and co-founder at Yottaa. And sitting next to me on my left is Jamie Hall, the CTO of MocoSpace. So today what we're going to do is going to go through a case study of MocoSpace's use of CDN and front-end optimization to deliver a better mobile experience.
Okay. MocoSpace is a gaming community on the mobile web. It's the best place to play games, find friends, and stay connected on your mobile device. We have over 25 million members who access the site from the browsers on their mobile devices. We support just about every mobile device out there, smartphone and non-smartphone, as well as other connected devices. Users spend a huge amount of time on the site, over 60 million minutes per day, browsing the site, playing games, and using the social and community features on the site. We offer the largest catalog of free-to-play HTML5 games for mobile. We actually provide a platform. It's an open social standards-based platform, which you can think of as being very similar in concept to the Facebook app platform, in that content developers who work on our platform are building their games, are hosting their games, and we're then incorporating games. I don't know if that's me, somebody else, but are hosting those games and pulling that content into the mocospace.com mobile website. We provide, in addition, a number of services through the platform, and recently, as we've just announced today, we're working with Yottaa to provide CDN and front-end optimization services as part of the platform to the developers who are working on our platform. So again, we're working with over 24 developers really located geographically all over the planet, hosting their content however and wherever they choose, and we're accelerating that content through our platform. And talking a little bit about the key challenges about delivering a great user experience on mobile and how that's different in particular from a desktop environment. Number one is mobile networks are slow. There's a high degree of packet loss. This is due to typically operating in high noise environments. Connections between the mobile device and the cell phone towers are made ad hoc. This is for a number of reasons, such as preserving spectrum, device battery life, and so forth. And what this ultimately means is latency. Typically what we see on a 3G connection is latency in the neighborhood of 300 milliseconds per connection, which is more than 6 times what you typically see on a desktop broadband connection. Talking a little bit about mobile hardware as well. So the resources on a mobile device are extremely constrained when compared with a desktop device or a desktop computer. CPU speeds are typically 10 times slower than what you find on the desktop. This has obvious severe implications for things like parsing JavaScript, other scripts that are located and downloaded off the network. Typically we see a script parse time between 1 and 10 milliseconds per kilobyte. It's not unusual for a web application to use scripts which were upwards of 100 kilobytes, so parse times exceeding 1 second per script are not unusual on the slower devices. Lastly, the third bucket here of challenges and how they're different from desktop in particular is when it comes to mobile software. So not only in terms of mobile OSs, where we have obviously iOS, Android, other players like RIM, Windows, and others, but there's also a huge degree of fragmentation within those operating systems. Android in particular, which is now the most widely used smartphone OS globally, suffers particularly from the problem of fragmentation, where you have device vendors and mobile networks essentially pushing out updates on their own schedule rather than Apple, who kind of controls and centrally pushes out updates to iOS subscribers. So there's a huge degree of fragmentation there in different versions of Android and many implications there in terms of the capabilities of the OS versions that are out there in the market. And as an example, that I put up here, looking at the caching capabilities of particularly Android. And you can see how limited they are. Android provides 4 megabytes of cache to the standard mobile browser that comes packaged with Android. And the average mobile page is in the neighborhood of 400 kilobytes, which as compared to desktop is about half the size. But given the cache size, that means you can on average cache or plan on caching about 10 pages per mobile device on Android. The cache sizes vary. They're a little bit larger on the newer iOS devices, and there are others which unfortunately are quite a bit smaller. So talking just a little bit about front-end optimization, we'll go into more detail here. But basically what we've found, as well as many others who have looked at this, is that 90% of the page load time from the point where a user actually requests a page to the point where it's rendered fully on the device is happening on the front end. 90% of that time is either network time, so transmission from the server through the network to the device, or actually browser render time from the point where the browser receives the last byte from the network and is actually able to, for the page itself, and then actually is able to assemble all of the pieces of content needed to render that page for the user. And so the optimization techniques here, which we'll go into a bit of detail of, fall into 3 main buckets. 1, reduce the number of HTTP requests. 2, reducing the page size. And 3, optimizing page render time. Bob?
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. So, I mean, as Jonathan mentioned earlier, I mean, all of these optimizations are really geared towards shrinking that waterfall, as he showed. Like, really, the optimizations, as Jamie mentioned, do 3 things. 1, reduce the number of requests. 2, reduce the page load size. And then 3 is optimize the render time. So those are the things that the Yottaa solution for mobile acceleration performs. And we do it in a way that is really optimization as a service. So Jamie says he has 24 game developers, and they're hosting their infrastructure, some in China, some we don't know where, and they all have different varying of skills. Right? And he provides optimization as a service for all of the game developers to provide a consistent user experience for all of the game titles that he has under his control. So the way that we do that with the Yottaa solution for mobile acceleration is we tie the front-end optimizations with our global CDN, and we allow Jamie and our customers to customize that optimization experience for all of the games. So each game can be optimized slightly differently to provide the most optimization and the biggest acceleration benefit from the Yottaa platform. The other thing that's interesting about the way we provide our solution is that there's no installs. You don't need to buy a box. You don't need to install any software. It's a fully hosted system. On what we have built over the last 2 years is really a hybrid network of cloud and physical data centers. So we host both in the cloud providers, and also we have our own physical data centers. What that allows us to do is to scale up. So as Jamie brings on more games, or Jamie goes to 50 million users and 120 million gameplay minutes each day, we can scale up our infrastructure much more effectively. So we can use the cloud providers and those machines. We can utilize the CPU, the network bandwidth that they all have within inside the cloud providers, and also the physical data centers that we have to really accelerate the applications. And we fully support HTTPS, which is important in the free-to-play game space because they need to, the game's not always free. They're going to charge money for additional things within the game, and I'll show that in a second. So I'm going to go in a little bit of depth about front-end optimization. One of the interesting things about front-end optimization is most of the techniques developers and application owners can do themselves. Right? I've talked for 5 or 6 years on doing front-end optimizations. All of these things you can provide and do as a developer yourself. I can do combining JavaScript and combining CSS requests. And looking at the best practices of Mocospace, many of their game developers do provide those things automatically. They already do that before the application gets to Yottaa. But there are things that you can't do as a game developer. And some of those were mentioned by Jonathan. You can't really easily control the experience for different browsers, right? You can't easily provide a customized experience for a mobile device versus a desktop. That's really complicated for a developer. The other thing that's difficult is doing things like data URIs and CSS sprites, which we have found dramatically increase the performance of application. Whether you're a mobile game and you have little icons, removing those requests from the page load dramatically increases the page load experience. Also in e-commerce, it does the same thing. Making your images turn on instantly using data URIs is definitely a benefit. Other things is leveraging the cache with far future TTLs. These are all things that you can do as a developer, but are provided kind of out of a box. Jamie's experience is slightly different because he controls many different games through many different application from many different application providers. But the same thing can be applied for any enterprise, for any application, because it's not many times when you're going and you're building an application, optimization and performance is usually the last thing you think about, right? Even at Yottaa, we build our application, we put up our website, but a lot of times, even at Yottaa, like the guys building the application and building the website, think about the performance and stuff the last. So, and they think about it differently. So if one person's working on one page and another person's working on another page, the experience might be different. And that's where optimization as a service in the Yottaa platform kind of provides that consistent experience. So let's look at one of the games called Number Mash. So using the Yotta's mobile optimization service, one of the techniques that was the biggest benefit and provides the best correlation to optimization to page load time is reducing the requests. With data URIs, which basically allows you to take all of the bytes from an image and place those into the HTML and CSS so that image doesn't have to be requested. That removes one request. So as Jamie mentioned, the connection handling on mobile devices is much different. If you don't have to make a connection or you don't have to request those bytes, the experience is going to be more consistent. So in the Number Mash game, they removed 18 image requests using data URI. So that was over 50% of the images had been removed from downloading, and they are automatically displayed. So that's one of the interesting things about data URIs. It's not necessarily removing the request that provides the best user experience. It's that the bytes are inside the HTML or the CSS file. So when the application goes to display, the image is already inside the content, so it displays instantly. Right? That provides a great user experience for all of the people downloading and using this game. The other thing that we've done with the application is reduce the page load size. So less download, the better load time, right? That was one of the things that Jonathan had mentioned in one of his optimization slides. So the way we do that is minifying the HTML, the JavaScript, CSS, providing gzip compression for all content, right? So again, application developers and operations engineers control their environment differently, right? Having this service sit in front of the application and work with the CDN provides a far greater experience than the CDN can deliver on its own. And things like image optimization, so removing the extra bytes out of PNGs, doing things like right sizing. So if you're an e-commerce site, you may have like a thumbnail that may show like some content on the listings page, but then when you go to the details page, it provides a full image. What we've actually seen is many people provide that full image in the details page or in the or the product listing page. That wastes over like 80 to 90% because the full image on the details page may be 500 by 500, but inside of the product listing page, it's only a 120 by 120 image. If you're downloading all of those bytes up front, those aren't needed to display that page, right? So you're wasting a lot of bandwidth of doing that. And that's what optimization is all about. So like here's one of the things that we provide through Yottaa. As I mentioned, like Jamie can go in and control the experience for all of his applications differently. So each application or each game within his network can provide different optimizations. Some optimizations may be best suited for different games, right? And with any optimization, if you're optimizing anything, right, you need control of it, right? You need control in real time. So the Yottaa control panel allows you to go in and individually tune each game in each setting. So I can go in and specify and override different settings. So one of the things that we saw in one of the games on Happy Farm was the developer had set cache control private, so they weren't caching any of the information. Using the control panel, you can go in and you can override those settings. Right? So even though the developer had done something wrong, you can go in and you can correct that before it gets to the application and to the customer. So the other thing is optimizing page rendering time. So things like edge caching, like using a CDN. Obviously, using a CDN is a great benefit. I think the 80-20 rule that people provide is sort of a misnomer. Like what it leads people to believe is that they can solve 80% of their problems by using front-end optimization. That's not true, right? It's an interesting way to display it. I think the person who came up with it was a developer, so 80-20 is like a rule that you use in development. But like using the CDN and global caching, it does provide a much bigger benefit typically than a 20%. And even with front-end optimization, you still need to provide a global network to do caching at the edge. Other things that help, and these again, all things that you can do as a developer, but things that if you're providing a service like Yottaa, will do automatically. Place the CSS high as possible in the HTML. So you want your CSS to just be provided at the top of your HTML file. The JavaScript at the bottom, do asynchronous loading of JavaScript. So one of the things we find not necessarily in Jamie's games, but in other applications, and typically in websites and portals, that people provide a lot of plugins, right? Everybody wants, like my marketing guy wants me to tweet every 10 minutes while I'm doing my presentation today, right? If there's no tweet on for this presentation, he would have me take a picture of you guys right now and tweet that. That's what he wants, right? So he wants many things on our homepage. He wants the Twitter widget, he wants the Facebook widget, he wants the Google Plus widget. All of these widgets, right, that people want on their web pages. If you don't put them on there properly, block the content loading. Right? And where you happen to be in the world may block it more. I spend a lot of my time in China. If you go to China, like the Twitter and Facebook widgets are blocked. If you put those at the top of your web page, your page stops working, right? So asynchronously loading the JavaScript and doing the best practices of asynchronously loading provides a great benefit. Not only in China, not everybody's in China, most people are, but also wherever you are in the world. And then doing parallelized requests. So preemptively loading assets in parallel. So a couple of things that you can do is domain sharding. So you can add extra domains to your image URL. So I could say CDN-1, CDN-2, CDN-3.yottaa.com. But there's diminishing returns, like how many domains do you need? Like how many do you not need? Like one of the things that we saw is one of our people that had used our monitoring service and saw like best practices to do domain sharding, added 15 domains, right? So they had CDN1 through CDN15, right? Obviously, there's a diminishing amount of return for the CDN or for the DNS lookups, right? So doing the optimizations online and in real time provides a great benefit.
So just summing up, again, kind of the case study here on Mocospace. We've got a lot of members spending a lot of time We realized the benefit early of being able to provide the content through our platform in the most optimized way possible. We've seen direct benefits here, so some of the games that are running through our platform and taking advantage of the CDN and front-end optimization services, we've seen page load times essentially cut in half for some of the more popular games. It's resulted in the obvious benefits of people spending more time playing those games, people being more willing to spend money and seeing the upside there. As Bob mentioned, we're essentially providing this as a transparent service, so all of the 24 plus game developers that are on our platform, whether they're in China, Europe, and we've got them all over the world, are able to really seamlessly take advantage of these front-end optimizations. And of course, we benefit from that as well. So thank you very much. I don't know if anybody has any questions.
How much of the front-end optimization, how much of that is a consulting type process where you actually sit down with that customer and kind of work through them what they can do to optimize and improve their website versus things where they actually don't have to do anything and it's your software that kind of figures it out for them and it's done in real time and they don't necessarily have to rework their website from what they actually already had?
Yeah, so I mean, no one needs to rework their website. So in order to use Yottaa, you don't need to change your website in any way. What we do is we provide sort of the best practice optimizations right out of the box, right? So all of the CSS, JavaScript concatenation and minification is all provided. Use of the CDN, so we rewrite all of the URLs to a CDN, and we can use multiple CDNs if required. Also, all of the image optimizations are done, clashing, and all that stuff is done. Now, with any optimization, or anytime you're doing an optimization of anything, right, you get a certain level out of the box, right? You're going to get a certain level of optimization. Typically, we see between 30 and 50%. You can go in and then tweak the optimizations through the control panel I showed. So sometimes you may want to override certain control. So maybe one of your assets you don't want cached. Maybe one of the assets that isn't being cached you do want because maybe the cache control was set improperly on the server. So you can go in and override that. You can also specify like how you want your CSS and JavaScript concatenated. So you can gain additional ones. Now, we don't provide necessarily a consulting service. But we do consult with the customer and act and help them along their way to tune the system so that it's best used for their application. But we don't necessarily have a consulting service that goes out and does that.
I would say there as a developer, there are a lot of best practices still that a developer would want to adhere to, even using a transparent solution. So, like I said, 100 kilobyte JavaScript files, things like that. There are a number of best practices that you would still see a lot of, even with a transparent solution, you would still see a lot of benefit to kind of orienting yourself more around mobile development and more around some of the optimizations that you can do as a developer.
One more question over here.
How many of these front-end optimizations are done on the fly?
All of them. Yeah. Sorry. So how many of the front-end optimizations are done on the fly? In Yottaa, we do all of the front-end optimizations on the fly. So like everything that you see, all the optimizations are done in real time. Now, the way the system works is we continually gather more information about the application as it's used, and we can provide better optimizations for multiple pages as the application is used. But all of the optimizations are done in real time. So it progressively gets faster and faster as applications are used, as applications being used. Okay, last question.
In thinking about the user experience, the time to load is critically important, but also it's the content and the feel and the look, particularly if you're looking at video. How do you manage the trade-off between the two of those?
So the question is how do we manage the trade-off between the content and the performance, right?
Particularly for video.
Yeah, for video. At Yottaa, to be honest, we don't really work too much on video, right? We really work on the small asset delivery and the application, right? So, I mean, for us, everyone says performance is the most important thing. Obviously, you have performance, security, and content, right? Those are the things you need to work with as an application developer to make lots of money providing any application, right? And they all have to work together. I don't think one outweighs the other. I mean, if you have bad content and a great user experience, like, no one cares. So you gotta kind of work together. I think first as an application developer, right, you always start with your app first, right? And that's why it's interesting that Jamie can provide these services. The user wants to provide the best content. They're thinking about how to build the application so that it's the most interactive, it's the most engaging, and then comes performance, right? And then we think, like, well, this application isn't converting. We're not seeing the additional benefit of the gameplay. So applying the optimizations as a service also adds that as a benefit. But I don't think there's one. I think they all have to work together, and I think that's why services like Yottaa are important for the industry, because it lets the people focus on the content and deliver the best gameplay and best interactivity, because no matter how over time, the more interactive you make the game, the more content it has. So you have to do more optimizations, right? So it has to work together. All right, thank you, guys.